All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to my channel. Welcome to another video. We're going to be discussing some basic symbolism. Spent a little bit of time drawing some stuff up. As good of a person or an individual human being that I can draw on a whiteboard. I'm not as artistically inclined when it comes to whiteboard art. I spent more time on the actual star itself than I did the human being in the center. But without further ado, the topic is going to be the symbolism of the five-pointed star, how it correlates to the left versus right paradigm, and the center of balance, the place in the middle, how it all kind of correlates together. So first and foremost, we understand that there is the yin and yang principles, the feminine and masculine. In boxing, there's the left hand, right hand, the 1-2, so to speak. We've talked about that symbolism, and we've also talked about how, in terms of binary logic, 0 would indicate duality, as in separate components. Alright, so first and foremost, in general, in the majority of the population, the left hand is the feminine because it is the weaker of the two hands. Most people are, at the very least, what we can tell, they're right hand dominant. And they are left hand submissive, so to speak. Now, with that symbolism, even of the Domino's logo, probably my favorite thing to teach with, you've got the 1, you've got the 2, and you've got that line in between. So, first and foremost, the left hand, or the left wing of the bird symbol. Well, I wrote it in blue just for simplicity's sake, because left wing, Democrat, blue, that whole paradigm. And then the right hand or right wing would be written in red. That would be your yang principle. Okay, so first and foremost, right without the left would indicate duality. Okay, because having a right anything is, it's a parallel, or not a parallel, it's relative, okay? So there is no right without the left. There is no light without the darkness, ultimately. And one can say, yes, there's still light, but light in relation to what? Right? What are you comparing it to? If it's all light, then what is it? It just is. And if it's all darkness, then what is it? It isn't, so to speak. So, in the grand scheme of things, ultimately, the left versus right paradigm would be like your left hand fighting against your right hand, duality, right? A versus B, left versus right. That is the paradigm that the United States and all democratic systems are in, is ultimately A versus B, or A versus B versus C versus D, so on and so forth. I really hope you guys like that drawing. It's pretty crude, right? But, hey, whatever. Now, if we were to put this as the right hand being yang, or the light principle, and the left hand being yin, as in the darkness principle, there is a silver lining in the middle where you actually come across the reflector, the truth, right? The truth of what is, so to speak. That silver lining is the reflector, just as the left hand is a mirror for the right and the right is a mirror for the left. One of them is true, one of them is, quote, false. The jab tends to be the setup for the power shot, so it's your distractor. That front hand is the distraction, but not always. Sometimes that front hand is your knockout hand. But there's your silver cord or silver lining. That's your chi path, chakra system, whatever you want to call it, but ultimately it goes throughout the whole body. And so that's ultimately how you come to this truth of understanding, or at least how I came to the truth of the understanding that the right hand and left hand depend upon each other because they're ultimately two halves of the same thing. Just like life and death are ultimately two halves of the same thing. Or truth and falsehood are ultimately two halves of the same thing, which would be analysis of information. Right? So the whole left versus right paradigm is simply two aspects of the same coin of government. Christianity versus Islam is but two halves of the same coin of religious control. And same thing with this whole dollar versus euro versus Bitcoin versus etc., etc. It's all ultimately control paradigms working against each other, but also at the same time, they're kind of working with each other without really knowing it because they're creating further and further division. But oddly enough, Christ says, "Do not think that I came to bring peace upon the earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword." And in a different verse, it says, "I came not to bring peace, but division." It's been told to me by a person I considered a mentor at one point that Christ would be the vinculum in the 1/2, right? The vinculum being the dividing line. And does that mean that the dividing line is bad? No, not by any means. I would actually advocate caution against ascribing the concept that the dividing line is bad or negative or something that is to be done away with. I think that ultimately the division, to an extent, it exists for a reason. But so, you'll see in the little thumbnail picture for this episode, I've got it colored in red on one side, blue on the other. And then you can kind of make up your mind on which side's which. Doesn't really matter as far as how that's going. If you're looking at it left, right, if you're imagining it looking back at you, you know, red, blue, or red, blue. You catch my drift. So what I would actually say is, rather than the yang or yin, the left or right, ultimately both of these, left and right, are two halves of the same concept of duality, right? That those three pillars, ultimately the unity is found in that middle pillar, the one, right? I love you, like my wife wrote. You know, the I and the you are both two aspects of the concept of ego. And not to say that ego doesn't exist or that it shouldn't exist, but that ego is ego. And what is God's is God. So, rather than right versus left, or left versus right, or right and left versus the center, again, unity, true unity, it's the whole thing, right? Being the true self, what the individual is at the core of their existence. And it's funny how, I mean, granted, it's not exactly anatomically correct. That's a massive upper body compared to a rather not so massive lower body. But point being, the heart's about where the core or 0 point origin of the extrusion of the pentagon is. That 0 point, the center of the pentagon being at about where the heart of the human being is. And then, of course, you flip that upside down and you get man falling on his face. It's just something to think about, something to consider. I don't know if you guys got anything out of this. If you did, great. I've noticed there's a common occurrence on my videos right now where I'll see a spike in viewership, and then the views that I saw, like one video a few videos ago showed 7 videos, now it shows none. That spike disappears. So it's like people are viewing it, but then the views disappear. Could just be a glitch in the system. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say anything one way or another other than the truth, which is that I have observed that there is a pretty frequent occurrence of my viewership decreasing in viewers or views upon many videos. Really, it's mostly specific videos, but I mean, hey, whatever. But more to come. Hope you guys liked it. Anyways, peace.